The crystalline corridors of Nexus Prime Academy hummed with the subtle vibrations of 1,000 different life forms moving through its halls. Bioluminescent strips along the walls pulsed in rhythm with the station's heartbeat, casting an ethereal glow over students from across the galaxy. Four-armed Centauri discussed quantum mechanics in their musical language, while the silicon-based Vorthack debated hyperspace theory through electromagnetic frequencies that made nearby electronics chirp in harmony. Into this symphony of advanced civilization walked Lieutenant Sarah Chun, her simple gray flight suit a stark contrast to the elaborate biomechanical interfaces worn by her alien classmates. At 5 feet 6 inches, she barely reached the shoulder joints of the towering Draconis representatives, and her unaugmented human physiology seemed almost primitive compared to the enhanced beings surrounding her. The laughter started as a low rumble from a group of hegemony pilots, lounging near the Academy's central hub. The hegemony had ruled space travel for over 3,000 years, their sleek vessels cutting through hyperspace with an elegance that had never been matched. Their pilots were selected from birth, genetically enhanced, and cybernetically augmented to interface directly with their ship's quantum cores. "Look, it's the human," chittered Zyxala, her translator converting the complex clicks and whistles of her native tongue into standard galactic. The insectoid hegemony pilot's compound eyes glittered with amusement. "I heard they actually expect her to compete in the trials." Her companion, a massive Draconis named Keth Moore, exhaled a puff of superheated vapor that would have been lethal to most carbon-based life forms. "The Federation Council's diversity initiative has gone too far. What's next? Inviting gas giants to pilot solid matter ships." Sarah kept walking, her expression carefully neutral. She had expected this. Earth's admission to the Galactic Federation 3 years ago had been met with barely concealed condescension. Humanity was seen as a novelty species, interesting for their unusual resilience and adaptability, but hardly suitable for serious endeavors like interstellar navigation. The Academy's orientation chamber was a vast sphere lined with holographic displays showing the greatest achievements in galactic space travel. The Battle of Kepler's Nebula, where hegemony forces had used gravity wells to trap an entire enemy fleet. The Great Race of the Spiral Arms, where pilots pushed their ships beyond the theoretical limits of hyperspace. The discovery of the Void Gates, ancient alien constructs that allowed instantaneous travel between galactic clusters. Admiral Vexteros stood at the chamber's center, her Centauri form graceful despite being nearly 8 feet tall. Her 4 arms moved independently as she gestured to different displays, her voice carrying the harmonious overtones that made her species natural diplomats. "Welcome to Nexus Prime Academy," she announced, her words automatically translated into the native languages of the assembled students. "You represent the finest pilots from 237 worlds across 12 galactic sectors. Each of you has demonstrated exceptional skill in your home system's technology." Her golden eyes found Sarah in the crowd. "Some of you come from civilizations that have mastered hyperspace for millennia. Others represent species still taking their first steps into the cosmic community. But here, you will all be judged by the same standard: your ability to push the boundaries of what is possible." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah caught fragments of conversation in languages her translator couldn't parse, but the tone was unmistakable. Skepticism, amusement, pity. "The trials begin tomorrow," Vextera continued. "You will be assigned ships, matching your species' technological baseline. Hegemony pilots will use Mark 7 quantum interceptors. Draconis candidates will pilot thermal lance fighters. And yes," her gaze lingered on Sarah, "our human representative will use a ship built with Earth technology." The laughter was immediate and unrestrained. Even some of the more diplomatic species couldn't suppress their amusement. Human technology was notorious throughout the galaxy for its crude reliance on chemical propulsion and primitive computing systems. Their fastest ships barely achieved 1% of light speed, and their most advanced AI was less sophisticated than a standard galactic toaster. Zyxala's wings buzzed with mirth. "What's she going to use? Chemical rockets? Maybe she can throw rocks at the finish line." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she forced herself to remain still. She had trained for this moment for 5 years, ever since Earth's first contact with the Federation. She knew what everyone thought of human engineering. She had heard the jokes, seen the dismissive reports, watched alien dignitaries struggle to hide their laughter when touring Earth space facilities. But they didn't know about the Prometheus project. After orientation, Sarah made her way to her assigned quarters, a modest room designed for human environmental needs. The gravity was set to Earth standard, the atmosphere was a perfect nitrogen-oxygen mix, and the temperature was a comfortable 72 degrees Fahrenheit. It was, she realized, probably the most primitive environment in the entire academy. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. General Morrison's weathered face appeared on the small screen, his expression serious despite the obvious excitement in his eyes. "Sarah, how's the reception?" "About what we expected, sir. Lots of laughter. Very little respect." Morrison nodded grimly. "Good. Let them underestimate you. The transport ship Meridian will arrive tomorrow morning with your test vehicle. Remember, no one outside the project team knows what we've actually built. As far as the galaxy is concerned, you're piloting a standard Earth interceptor." "Understood, sir. What about the engine specifications? Will they run detailed scans?" "The outer hull and basic systems will read as completely normal. Dr. Yamamoto's stealth shielding will hide the real power source until you're ready to reveal it. As far as their sensors will show, you're flying a primitive chemical rocket with some minor improvements." Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving at the academy. "They're going to be very surprised. That's the idea. The galaxy thinks human engineering is backward because they've only seen our public technology. But Project Prometheus represents something entirely different. Something that could revolutionize space travel itself." The general's expression grew serious. "But, Sarah, remember what's at stake here. This isn't just about proving human capabilities. If the trials go well, the Federation has promised to consider Earth for full membership status. That means access to galactic trade routes, advanced technology exchanges, and protection under Federation law. But if you fail, Earth remains a curiosity rather than an equal partner," Sarah finished. "I understand the pressure, sir. I know you do. That's why we chose you. Get some rest. Tomorrow, you show them what human innovation really looks like." After the transmission ended, Sarah lay back on her simple cot and stared at the ceiling. Through her room's small viewport, she could see the Academy's training grounds. Vast spaces where alien ships practiced maneuvers that defied what she had thought were the basic laws of physics. Hegemony vessels that seemed to phase in and out of existence. Draconis ships that bent space around themselves like cosmic origami. Vorthack fighters that moved through solid matter as easily as empty space. How could human technology compete with such impossible capabilities? The answer lay in humanity's greatest strength, their refusal to accept limitations. While alien civilizations had perfected hyperspace travel thousands of years ago, they had also stopped innovating. Their technology had reached a plateau of efficiency and elegance, but it was still bound by the same fundamental principles that had governed space travel since the first hyperspace gate was opened. Humans, however, had approached the problem from an entirely different angle. Instead of trying to master existing technology, they had asked a different question. What if the basic assumptions about faster-than-light travel were wrong? The next morning, Sarah made her way to the Academy's main hangar, a structure so vast it had its own weather systems. Alien ships of every conceivable design filled the space. Sleek hegemony interceptors that looked more like sculptures than vehicles, heavily armored Draconis fighters bristling with weapon systems, and exotic vessels from species she couldn't even identify. At the far end of the hangar, almost hidden behind a collection of maintenance equipment, sat her ship. The Terran Interceptor looked exactly like what everyone expected from human engineering, a blocky, utilitarian design with visible thruster ports and crude sensor arrays. Its hull was a matte gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving it an almost primitive appearance compared to the gleaming alien vessels surrounding it. Sarah ran her hand along the hull, feeling the slight vibration that indicated the ship's true power source was already online. To outside observers, the vibration would seem like normal engine cooling cycles. They had no idea they were looking at the most advanced spacecraft ever constructed. "Ah!" The human arrives to see her chariot. A familiar voice called out. Zyxala approached, flanked by several other non-human pilots. I must admit, it's exactly what I expected. Very functional. Functional is good, Sarah replied evenly. Sometimes simple designs are the most reliable. Kethmore's massive form cast a shadow over the group. Reliability won't help you in the trials, human. Speed, agility, and raw power determine the winners. Your chemical rockets simply cannot compete with quantum propulsion. We'll see, Sarah said, continuing her inspection of the ship's exterior systems. Indeed we will. ZYXL's translator made her words sound almost sympathetic. I do hope you won't be too disappointed when the trials demonstrate the gap between human and galactic technology. Perhaps it will encourage your species to focus on what you do best, entertainment and primitive crafts. Sarah stopped her inspection and turned to face the group. For a moment, her careful diplomatic mask slipped, and they saw something in her eyes that made even the massive Draconis take a half step back. You know what human beings do best? She asked quietly. We surprise people. With that, she climbed into her ship's cockpit, leaving the alien pilots staring after her with expressions ranging from amusement to puzzlement. Inside the cockpit, Sarah activated her ship's systems with practiced efficiency. To anyone monitoring her startup sequence, everything appeared completely normal. Chemical fuel pumps engaging, primitive navigation computers coming online, basic communication arrays establishing contact with the Academy's traffic control. But hidden deep within the ship's core, something unprecedented was awakening. Dr. Yamamoto's quantum resonance engine existed in a state of controlled impossibility, drawing power from the fundamental vibrations of space itself. It was technology that could revolutionize civilization, but only if Sarah could prove it worked. As she completed her pre-flight checklist, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow, the trials would begin, and the galaxy would learn that sometimes the most primitive-looking solutions concealed the most revolutionary ideas. The other pilots were still laughing about the human and her chemical rocket. But laughter, Sarah had learned, was often the sound people made right before everything they thought they knew turned out to be wrong. Dawn at Nexus Prime Academy was a spectacular affair. The station orbited a binary star system, and as both suns crested the horizon simultaneously, the crystalline structures of the Academy caught and refracted the light into thousands of dancing rainbows. Students from across the galaxy gathered in the observation decks to witness the natural light show, but Sarah barely noticed the beauty. Her attention was focused entirely on the trial course that had been activated during the night. The course stretched across 3 cubic light years of space, marked by massive energy beacons that pulsed with different colors and frequencies. Each beacon represented a different challenge designed to test the fundamental capabilities of both pilot and ship. Speed trials through asteroid fields, precision navigation around gravity wells, combat simulations against automated defenders, and, finally, the ultimate test, a race through the notorious Maelstrom Nebula, where electromagnetic storms could fry electronics and gravitational anomalies had been known to tear ships apart. Admiral Vextera's voice echoed through the hangar's communication system as pilots made final preparations for their ships. The trials will proceed in order of technological classification. Advanced quantum drive vessels will compete first, followed by intermediate fusion-powered craft, and, finally, primitive chemical propulsion systems. Sarah winced at the word primitive, but she understood the classification system. From the galaxy's perspective, human technology ranks somewhere between stone tools and steam engines on the sophistication scale. The fact that Earth had been invited to participate at all was considered a diplomatic courtesy rather than a serious evaluation of capability. Xela's hegemony interceptor rose from the hangar floor with impossible grace, its hull shimmering as it phase-shifted between dimensions. The ship's quantum drive created no visible exhaust, no sound, and no apparent effort as it accelerated toward the course's starting line. Within seconds, it had reached velocities that would have torn Sarah's ship apart, if her ship had actually been what it appeared to be. First trial begins in 30 seconds, announced the course computer, its artificial intelligence sophisticated enough to manage millions of calculations per microsecond. Pilot ZYXLA, please confirm readiness. Hegemony vessel Storm Dancer, ready for trial sequence, came the translated response. Sarah watched through her ship's displays as ZY-Xala's interceptor approached the first beacon. The trial began with a speed run through an artificial asteroid field. Chunks of rock and metal hurled at the ships by magnetic launchers, creating a three-dimensional maze of deadly obstacles moving at relativistic speeds. Storm Dancer phased through the asteroids like they were made of smoke. ZY-Xala's enhanced reflexes and cybernetic implants allowed her to process navigation data faster than baseline organic minds could even perceive it. Her ship twisted and dove through gaps that shouldn't have existed, its hull flickering between dimensions to avoid impacts that would have been inevitable for conventional craft. The speed trial was completed in 4 minutes and 37 seconds, a new Academy record. "Impressive," Sarah murmured, genuinely awed by the display of skill and technology. But the trials had only begun. The precision navigation test required pilots to thread their ships through a series of gravity wells generated by artificial black holes. The gravitational fields created a maze of twisted space-time where normal physics broke down and even light followed curved paths. Ships had to maintain exact positioning while their hulls were subjected to tidal forces that could stretch metal like taffy. ZY-Xala's performance was flawless. Her ship's quantum stabilizers neutralized the worst effects of the gravity wells, while her enhanced neural interface allowed her to calculate trajectories through curved space in real time. She completed the navigation course in under 10 minutes, another record-breaking performance. The combat simulation presented a different challenge. Automated defense drones, programmed with the tactical knowledge of a dozen galactic civilizations, swarmed toward her ship. Each drone was equipped with weapons that could adapt to their target's defensive capabilities, creating an evolving threat that required constant tactical adjustments. Storm Dancer's response was devastating. The ship's phase shift capabilities made it nearly impossible to target, while its quantum weapons fired bursts of coherent energy that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The drones, despite their sophisticated programming, were destroyed so quickly that the engagement barely registered on Sarah's instruments. Combat trial completed in 2 minutes and 15 seconds, the course computer announced. New Academy record established. Finally came the ultimate test, navigation through the Maelstrom Nebula. The nebula was a chaotic region of space where stellar winds, electromagnetic storms, and gravitational anomalies created conditions that had destroyed countless ships over the centuries. Pilots had to rely entirely on their skills and their ship's capabilities, as the electromagnetic interference made outside communication impossible. Sarah watched ZY-Xala's ship disappear into the swirling clouds of ionized gas and debris. For 23 agonizing minutes, there was no contact, no sensor readings, no indication whether the hegemony pilot had survived the passage. Then, like a ghost emerging from a storm, Storm Dancer burst from the nebula's far side, its hull scarred but intact. Maelstrom transit completed in 23 minutes, 41 seconds, the computer announced. Total trial time, 40 minutes, 23 seconds. Current ranking, first place. The hangar erupted in cheers from the hegemony delegation. ZY-Xala had not only completed every trial, she had set new records in 3 of the 4 categories. It was a performance that would be discussed in Academy halls for generations. Kethmore's Draconis fighter, Flamelance, took the course next. The massive ship relied on raw power rather than dimensional manipulation, its thermal propulsion systems generating temperatures hot enough to melt lesser vessels' hulls. The Draconis approach to the trials was direct and brutal, smashing through obstacles rather than avoiding them, overwhelming enemies with superior firepower, and forcing their way through dangerous regions through sheer mechanical strength. Flamelance's passage through the asteroid field was like watching a controlled explosion. Instead of dodging the obstacles, Kethmore simply vaporized anything in his path, his ship's thermal cannons turning rock and metal into superheated plasma. The approach was less elegant than ZY-Xala's dimensional phasing, but it was undeniably effective. The gravity, navigation proved more challenging for the Draconis vessel. Without quantum stabilizers, Flamelance had to rely on brute force and careful maneuvering to avoid being trapped by the artificial black holes. Kethmore's piloting skills were impressive. His species had been navigating dangerous space for over 2,000 years, but his ship's design made precision work difficult. The thermal engines were optimized for power, not finesse. The combat simulation played to Dracona's strengths. Flame Lance tore through the defense drones like a tornado through paper buildings. Each shot from the ship's main cannons released enough energy to power a small city, and Kethmore's targeting systems locked onto multiple enemies simultaneously. The drones' adaptive defenses were useless against weapons that simply obliterated everything in their path. The Maelstrom Nebula proved challenging for different reasons. The electromagnetic storms that filled the region interfered with thermal targeting systems, while gravitational anomalies made it difficult to maintain the precise engine balance required for Dracona's propulsion. Kethmore fought his way through the nebula like a ship sailing through a hurricane, his skill keeping Flame Lance intact despite conditions that would have destroyed less robust vessels. When he emerged, his total time was 57 minutes, placing him firmly in second position. Respectable, but not enough to challenge HFY's dominance. 5 more pilots completed their trials over the next 4 hours. A Vorthack crystalline ship that moved through solid matter like water. A gas giant entity that piloted a vessel made entirely of controlled plasma. Beings so alien that Sarah couldn't even determine their method of propulsion. Each performance was impressive in its own way, but none came close to matching the Hegemony pilot's record-setting run. Finally, as the binary suns reached their zenith, Admiral Vextara's voice echoed through the hangar one last time. Final competitor, please prepare for trial sequence. Pilot Sarah Chun, Terran Interceptor, Chemical Propulsion Classification. The laughter started immediately. After watching ships that could phase between dimensions and weapons that violated the laws of thermodynamics, the idea of a chemical rocket attempting the same course seemed absurd. Several alien spectators had gathered in the hangar's observation areas, drawn by curiosity about what they expected to be an entertaining failure. Sarah took a deep breath and activated her ship's primary systems. To external sensors, the Terran Interceptor startup sequence looked exactly like every human ship that had ever been built. Chemical fuel pumps engaged with audible mechanical clicking. Primitive computers ran diagnostic checks with the subtle whirring of cooling fans. Navigation arrays deployed with the slow hydraulic movement of purely mechanical systems. But deep within the ship's core, something unprecedented was awakening. Dr. Yamamoto's quantum resonance engine existed in a state of controlled impossibility. Instead of burning chemical fuel or manipulating exotic matter, it drew power directly from the quantum vacuum itself, the seething sea of virtual particles that existed everywhere in space. The technology had taken 30 years to develop, hidden in black project facilities while the rest of humanity built conventional rockets and dreamed of reaching the stars. The engine's operation violated several fundamental principles of physics as understood by galactic civilization. It generated thrust without reaction mass. It created gravitational fields without massive objects. It manipulated space-time itself, not through brute force like hegemony quantum drives, but by convincing reality that the ship existed simultaneously in multiple locations. Sarah's hands moved across controls that looked primitive but concealed quantum processors more sophisticated than anything in the hegemony fleet. The ship's apparent chemical thrusters were actually camouflaged field generators, designed to produce the visual effects of conventional propulsion while hiding the true source of the ship's capabilities. Course computer, Terran Interceptor ready for trial sequence. Acknowledged. Trial begins in 10 seconds. Through her displays, Sarah could see Zawayaxala and Kethmore watching from the hangar's observation deck. Their expressions showed polite interest mixed with barely concealed amusement. They expected to witness an embarrassing demonstration of human inadequacy, followed by a diplomatic rescue mission when her primitive ship inevitably failed. They had no idea they were about to watch the first test of technology that would revolutionize galactic civilization. The countdown reached 0, and Sarah engaged her ship's true propulsion system. The Terran Interceptor didn't accelerate toward the course. It didn't move at all in any conventional sense. Instead, reality rearranged itself around the ship. Space folded, twisted, and reshaped until the interceptor existed at the asteroid field's entrance without having traveled through the intervening distance. The maneuver was so subtle that external observers saw only a slight shimmer, like heat distortion in atmosphere. But Sarah was already beginning the speed trial, and what happened next would change how the galaxy understood the nature of space travel itself. The asteroid field stretched before Sarah like a three-dimensional minefield, chunks of rock and metal hurtling through space at velocities that would turn any normal ship into scattered atoms. The magnetic launchers that fed the field could accelerate debris to significant fractions of light speed, creating a constantly shifting maze of destruction that had challenged pilots for generations. Sarah studied the pattern for exactly 3 seconds, then did something that shattered every assumption about how ships moved through space. Instead of dodging between the asteroids, she convinced them they weren't there. The quantum resonance engine didn't just manipulate matter and energy, it manipulated the fundamental information that defined reality itself. To the universe, the Terran Interceptor's navigation computer was sending a very simple message. The asteroids existed in a parallel probability state, occupying the same spatial coordinates, but in a dimension that couldn't interact with her ship. From the outside, it looked like Sarah was flying directly through solid rock. Her ship passed through asteroid after asteroid as if they were made of holographic projections, never slowing, never changing course, maintaining a perfectly straight line toward the next beacon. In the observation deck, ZYXL's translator began making error sounds as it struggled to process what her enhanced senses were telling her. "That's impossible," she whispered, her compound eyes tracking the human ship's impossible progress. "Matter cannot occupy the same space as other matter. It's a fundamental law." Kethmore's thermal sensors were recalibrating frantically, unable to reconcile the data they were receiving. "Her ship's mass readings are fluctuating," he rumbled, superheated vapor escaping from his nostrils in agitation. "One moment she registers as a solid object, the next as empty space. My instruments must be malfunctioning." They weren't malfunctioning. They were detecting something that shouldn't exist, a ship that could selectively choose which aspects of physics applied to it at any given moment. Sarah completed the asteroid field in 47 seconds, nearly 6 times faster than ZYXL's record-breaking run. But she was just getting started. The precision navigation trial awaited, a maze of artificial black holes whose gravitational fields created a twisted landscape of curved space-time. Ships had to thread needle-thin paths between the gravity wells while their hulls were stretched and compressed by tidal forces that could tear molecules apart. Sarah approached the first gravity well and engaged a different aspect of her ship's impossible capabilities. The quantum resonance engine began generating what Dr. Yamamoto had called negative mass fields, regions of space where the fundamental relationship between matter and gravity was inverted. Instead of being attracted to massive objects, Sarah's ship was repelled by them. The stronger the gravitational field, the faster she accelerated away from it. The result was a form of movement that looked like controlled falling, but in reverse. Sarah's ship surfed the gravity wells like a master surfer riding impossible waves, gaining speed with each gravitational encounter rather than being slowed by them. She whipped around black holes that should have trapped her, using their own gravitational energy to accelerate toward the next objective. The course that had taken ZYXL 10 minutes was completed in 93 seconds. In the Academy's command center, Admiral Vextera stared at her instruments with growing alarm. The readings made no sense. According to every sensor, every measurement device, every fundamental principle of physics she understood, what was happening was impossible. "Run a full diagnostic on all monitoring systems," she ordered her staff, her 4 arms moving independently as she tried to process multiple data streams simultaneously. "Diagnostics complete, Admiral," reported her aide, a young Centauri whose golden skin had gone pale with confusion. "All systems are functioning normally. The readings are accurate." "Then, explain to me how a primitive chemical rocket is outperforming quantum drive technology." "I cannot, Admiral. The human ship appears to be violating several fundamental laws of physics simultaneously." On the course, Sarah was approaching the combat simulation. 50 automated defense drones materialized around her ship, each one equipped with adaptive weapons and shields that could analyze and counter any known technology in the galactic database. They moved with predatory grace, positioning themselves for a coordinated attack that should have overwhelmed any single vessel. Sarah's response was elegant in its simplicity. She fragmented her ship. Not physically, the Terran Interceptor remained intact, but informationally. To the universe's fundamental database of what existed where, Sarah's ship suddenly occupied 51 different locations simultaneously. Each drone found itself facing what appeared to be a perfect copy of the human vessel, complete with identical energy signatures and mass readings. But only one of the copies was real. The drones opened fire, their adaptive weapons systems analyzing and adjusting to each target. Energy beams and projectile weapons filled space with deadly light as they attacked what they believed were 51 enemy ships. Their targeting computers worked flawlessly, their weapons performed exactly as designed, and their shots would have been devastating if they had hit anything real. 50 of the copies were probability phantoms, ships that existed only in the quantum foam of unrealized possibilities. The drones' weapons passed harmlessly through empty space, while their sensors insisted they were hitting solid targets. Meanwhile, the real Sarah was systematically destroying the drones from angles they couldn't defend against. Her ship's weapons, disguised as primitive projectile systems, but actually quantum phase cannons, could target enemies that existed in different dimensional states. She wasn't just shooting at the drones' physical forms. She was attacking their quantum signatures directly. Each shot unmade a drone's existence at the most fundamental level, causing them to simply cease being rather than exploding or burning. To external observers, it looked like the defense drones were vanishing one by one, deleted from reality by an invisible force. The combat simulation was over in 38 seconds. In the observation deck, absolute silence had replaced the earlier laughter and conversation. Species that had mastered space travel for millennia found themselves watching technology that operated on principles they couldn't even begin to understand. "She's not using conventional propulsion at all," Alice said quietly. Her translator struggling with the complex harmonic frequencies her distress was generating. "That ship, it's not moving through space. It's changing space around itself." "Impossible," Kethmore rumbled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "No species has ever developed technology that can manipulate space-time directly. Even the ancients who built the void gates required massive installations to bend reality. The ancients built stationary structures," observed Dr. Velterra, a Vorthack scientist whose crystalline form was vibrating with excitement rather than fear. "But this human has somehow miniaturized the same principles. If that's really what we're seeing, then their technology isn't just advanced, it's revolutionary." Sarah was approaching the final trial now, the Maelstrom Nebula that had challenged every pilot who had ever attempted the course. The nebula was a hellscape of electromagnetic storms and gravitational anomalies, a region of space where reality itself seemed unstable and hostile to any form of ordered matter. For conventional ships, navigating the nebula was a test of skill, endurance, and luck. Pilots had to thread their way through storms that could fry electronics and gravitational fields that could crush hulls like eggshells. The electromagnetic interference made outside communication impossible, leaving each pilot alone with their ship and their abilities. Sarah entered the nebula and immediately understood why it had terrified generations of pilots. The space around her ship writhed with energies that seemed almost alive, reaching out with tendrils of force that tried to tear her vessel apart. Gravitational waves swept through the region like tsunami, warping space-time into impossible geometries that made navigation a nightmare. But instead of fighting the chaos, Sarah embraced it. The quantum resonance engine had been designed to work with uncertainty, to function in the gaps between what was real and what was possible. The nebula's chaotic energies weren't obstacles to be overcome. They were fuel to be harvested. Sarah's ship began absorbing the storm's energy directly, converting electromagnetic chaos into coherent thrust and using gravitational anomalies as navigation waypoints. Instead of being damaged by the nebula's hostile environment, her ship grew stronger, its impossible capabilities enhanced by the very forces that should have destroyed it. She surfed through the maelstrom like a cosmic surfer, riding a hurricane made of light and gravity. Electromagnetic storms that could fry conventional electronics became power sources. Gravitational waves that could crush normal ships became highways of accelerated motion. What should have been a 20-minute struggle became a 3-minute joyride. When Sarah's ship emerged from the far side of the nebula, the core's computer's voice carried an undertone of confusion that artificial intelligences weren't supposed to possess. Maelstrom transit completed in 3 minutes, 12 seconds. Combat trial, 38 seconds. Navigation trial, 1 minute, 33 seconds. Speed trial, 47 seconds. Total trial time, 5 minutes, 50 seconds. The silence that followed was absolute. In the Academy's history, no pilot had ever completed the course in under 30 minutes. Sarah had just shattered that record by a factor of 5. Admiral Vexthera's voice cut through the stunned quiet, though even her diplomatic training couldn't quite hide her shock. Terran Interceptor, please return to the Academy for debriefing. And congratulations on your unique performance. As Sarah guided her ship back toward Nexus Prime Academy, she could see dozens of alien vessels maintaining careful distance from her position. Ships that had seemed impossibly advanced just hours ago now looked primitive and limited compared to technology that could rewrite the basic rules of existence. The laughter had stopped completely. In its place was something Sarah had never heard before in her interactions with galactic civilization: respectful silence, tinged with a kind of awe usually reserved for encountering something divine. But she knew the real shock was still to come. The trials had demonstrated what her ship could do, but they hadn't revealed the most important truth about human engineering: that the seemingly primitive technology was actually more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever imagined. Soon, they would want to know how it worked. And when they learned the answer, Sarah realized it was going to change everything. The debriefing chamber at Nexus Prime Academy had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. Representatives from every major galactic civilization crowded around the central holographic display, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, harmonics, and electromagnetic frequencies that the universal translators struggled to process. Sarah sat in the center of it all, still wearing her simple human flight suit, surrounded by beings whose technology had shaped galactic civilization for thousands of years. The contrast was stark. She looked like a primitive among gods, yet her performance had just redefined what was possible in space travel. Admiral Vexthera called for order, her 4 arms moving in gestures that conveyed authority across multiple species. "We are here to understand what we have witnessed," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that demanded attention. In 30 years of Academy trials, no pilot has ever completed the course in under 30 minutes. Lieutenant Chun has done so in under 6 minutes, using technology that appears to violate fundamental laws of physics. Dr. Corthaven, the hegemony's chief technology specialist, leaned forward on his insectoid limbs. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like multifaceted jewels as he spoke. "Our sensors detected impossible readings throughout the trial sequence. The human ship demonstrated selective intangibility, negative mass generation, and what appeared to be controlled manipulation of probability fields. These capabilities exceed anything in our technological database. Perhaps there was sensor malfunction," suggested Commander Thexana, a military representative from the Draconis Empire. Her massive form radiated heat that made the chamber's environmental systems work overtime. "Primitive technology cannot outperform quantum drive systems. There must be another explanation." Sarah listened to the debate with carefully concealed amusement. They were trying to rationalize what they had seen using their existing understanding of physics, but human technology operated on entirely different principles. She waited for the right moment to speak, knowing that her next words would reshape how they thought about the universe itself. Dr. Velterra, the Vorthack scientist, approached the central display with her crystalline form chiming softly as she moved. "I have analyzed the sensor data extensively," she announced, her silicon-based voice creating harmonic frequencies that made nearby electronics resonate. "The readings are consistent and accurate. The human ship did indeed demonstrate capabilities that should not be possible according to our understanding of physics." "Then our understanding is incomplete," Admiral Vexthera concluded. "Lieutenant Shun, will you explain how your ship operates?" Sarah stood slowly, aware that every sensor in the chamber was focused on her, recording and analyzing her words for future study. "Before I explain the technology," she said carefully, I need you to understand something about human engineering philosophy. She gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show the development of galactic technology over millennia. Every species in this room mastered faster-than-light travel by building upon discoveries made by previous civilizations. The hegemony perfected quantum manipulation techniques first developed by the Andromedans. The Draconis thermal propulsion systems evolved from ancient Vorthack plasma theories. Each generation improved upon existing knowledge, creating increasingly sophisticated applications of the same fundamental principles. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. It was a well-known pattern in galactic history, technological evolution through incremental improvement of established concepts. Humans took a different approach, Sarah continued. When we first encountered your civilizations and saw your incredible technologies, we didn't try to copy them. We couldn't. We lacked the basic knowledge and industrial infrastructure. Instead, we asked a different question. What if the fundamental assumptions about faster-than-light travel were wrong? Dr. Corthaven's translator made skeptical sounds. The physics of hyperspace manipulation are well understood. Thousands of years of development have proven the principles to be correct. Correct within certain parameters, Sarah agreed. But what if there were other parameters? What if space and time weren't fixed properties to be manipulated, but flexible information structures that could be edited? The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words began to sink in. They had been thinking of space as an ocean to be navigated, but Sarah was suggesting it might be more like a computer program that could be modified. Impossible, whispered Commander Thexana, but her voice lacked conviction. Reality cannot be programmed like a computer system. Why not? Sarah asked simply. Your own quantum theories suggest that information is the fundamental building block of existence. Particles, forces, even space-time itself, all emerge from underlying information structures. We just learned how to access and modify those structures directly. She activated her personal communicator, and a new figure appeared in the holographic display. Dr. Elizabeth Yamamoto, the lead scientist behind the Prometheus project. Even through the transmission, the elderly physicist's excitement was palpable. Colleagues, Dr. Yamamoto began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent her lifetime pushing the boundaries of knowledge. What you witnessed today was the first public demonstration of quantum information manipulation technology. We call it the Prometheus engine, after the mythological figure who brought fire to humanity. Admiral Vextera leaned forward, all four arms moving in gestures of intense interest. How does it function? Reality exists as information, Dr. Yamamoto explained, gesturing to complex equations that appeared in the holographic display. What we call particles, forces, and fields are actually data structures in a vast computational matrix. The Prometheus engine accesses this matrix directly and makes editorial suggestions. Editorial suggestions? Dr. Velterra's crystalline form was vibrating with frequencies that indicated extreme curiosity. We convince the universe that certain conditions are true, Sarah explained. During the asteroid field trial, we informed reality that the obstacles existed in a parallel probability state, technically present, but unable to interact with our ship. For the gravity well navigation, we modified our ship's mass properties, creating negative mass fields that repelled gravitational attraction rather than being captured by it. Dr. Corthaven's compound eyes were focused entirely on Sarah now, his earlier skepticism replaced by intense scientific interest. How do you interface with these information structures? That's where human cognitive architecture becomes crucial, Dr. Yamamoto interjected. Most species in the galaxy have evolved highly specialized neural pathways optimized for their particular environments. Your brains are incredibly efficient, but also somewhat rigid in their processing patterns. Human brains are different, Sarah continued. We're generalists, adaptable, creative, capable of making intuitive leaps that bypass logical constraints. Our neural architecture is uniquely suited for interfacing with quantum information systems. She gestured to her flight suit, and for the first time the assembled delegates noticed the subtle patterns woven into the fabric, geometric designs that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. This isn't just clothing, Sarah explained. It's a quantum interface system. The patterns you see are actually quantum processors, each one more sophisticated than your most advanced computers. They're grown rather than manufactured, using techniques we developed from studying how human consciousness interfaces with quantum uncertainty. The implications were staggering. They weren't just looking at advanced technology, they were witnessing a completely different approach to the relationship between mind and matter. Commander Thexana's thermal regulation systems were working overtime as she processed what she was hearing. You're saying that human consciousness can directly manipulate reality? Not exactly, Dr. Yamamoto corrected. Human consciousness can interface with the quantum information structures that define reality. The Prometheus engine amplifies and focuses this interface, allowing a trained pilot to make precise modifications to local space-time conditions. But this changes everything, Admiral Vextera said slowly, her harmonious voice carrying undertones of awe and concern. If reality can be programmed like data, then the boundaries between what is possible and impossible become meaningless. Not meaningless, Sarah said, but definitely more flexible than anyone imagined. Dr. Velterra approached the display, showing Dr. Yamamoto's equations, her crystalline form resonating with harmonic frequencies as she analyzed the mathematics. These calculations, they're based on information theory rather than traditional physics. You're treating space-time as a database rather than a geometric structure. Exactly, Dr. Yamamoto confirmed. And like any database, it can be queried, modified, and updated. The Prometheus engine is essentially a quantum database management system that allows real-time editing of local reality parameters. The chamber erupted in excited discussion as delegates began to grasp the revolutionary nature of human technology. Species that had mastered conventional physics for millennia found themselves confronting ideas that challenged their most fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence. But not everyone was enthusiastic about the revelations. This technology is dangerous, declared High Counselor Zarthek, the senior hegemony representative who had remained silent until now. His authority was absolute. He spoke for the civilization that had ruled galactic space for 3,000 years. If reality can be arbitrarily modified, then the stability of civilization itself is at risk. How so? Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew where the conversation was heading. Consider the implications, Zarthek continued, his translator converting his complex communications into words heavy with menace. Weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. Defenses that could make entire fleets intangible. Economic systems that could manufacture matter from pure information. Your technology doesn't just threaten military balance. It threatens the fundamental order that has maintained galactic peace for centuries. Admiral Vextera nodded slowly, understanding the concern. The Prometheus technology could render all existing military and economic structures obsolete virtually overnight. Which is why, Sarah said carefully, Earth proposes a different approach to galactic civilization. She activated another display, this one showing Earth's proposal for sharing the Prometheus technology. We're not interested in conquest or domination. Human history has taught us that hoarding advanced technology eventually leads to conflict and destruction. Instead, we propose a collaborative development program. Collaboration? Dr. Corthaven's scientific excitement was clearly warring with his species' natural caution. What kind of collaboration? Full technology sharing, Dr. Yamamoto announced. Complete scientific cooperation. Joint development of applications that benefit all species rather than advantages that favor one civilization over others. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this unprecedented offer. In galactic history, no species had ever voluntarily shared their most advanced technology with potential competitors. Why would humans make such an offer? High Counselor Zarthek asked suspiciously. Because, Sarah replied, we've learned something that your civilizations apparently haven't. The universe is far stranger and more dangerous than any of us imagined. And if we're going to survive what's coming, we're going to need to work together. She activated a final display, showing deep space sensor readings that made everyone in the chamber fall silent with shock and growing fear. The void gates that your ancestors discovered, they weren't built by any extinct civilization. They're still active, and something is using them to watch us. We've detected artificial intelligence networks operating on scales that dwarf entire galactic clusters, and they've been taking an increasing interest in biological civilizations. The readings showed massive energy signatures moving through space at velocities that exceeded even theoretical limits. Structures that spanned light years. Technologies that operated on principles that made even the Prometheus engine look primitive by comparison. The reason we developed reality manipulation technology, Sarah concluded, wasn't to win Academy trials or impress alien civilizations. We developed it because we think we're going to need every advantage we can get to survive what's coming. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates began to understand that everything had changed, not just their understanding of human capabilities, but their place in a universe that was far more complex and dangerous than they had ever imagined. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council convened 6 hours after Sarah's revelations in the vast amphitheater that had hosted diplomatic negotiations for over a millennium. Representatives from 237 worlds filled the crystalline chamber, their various forms creating a living tapestry of galactic diversity. But today, the usual diplomatic protocols have been suspended. Fear and uncertainty hung in the air like a toxic atmosphere. High Chancellor Mordek, the ancient Centauri who had guided the Federation for over 3 centuries, called the assembly to order with a gravity that made even the most experienced diplomats fall silent. His 4 arms moved in patterns that conveyed absolute authority as he addressed the gathered civilizations. "We face an unprecedented situation," he began, his harmonious voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "Human technology has demonstrated capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of physics. More troubling, they claim to have detected threats that could endanger all biological civilization." Sarah stood at the central podium, no longer looking like an out-of-place primitive among advanced beings. The previous day's revelations had transformed her from an amusing curiosity into the representative of the most technologically advanced species anyone had ever encountered. Around her, holographic displays showed the deep space sensor readings that had stunned the Academy debriefing. "The data is undeniable," Admiral Vextera reported to the Council, her scientific analysis carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Human sensors have detected artificial intelligence networks operating on galactic scales. The energy signatures we're seeing suggest technological capabilities that exceed our most optimistic theoretical projections." Dr. Veltera's crystalline form chimed softly as she approached the central display. "I have analyzed the human sensor data extensively," she announced. "The patterns are consistent with distributed artificial intelligence systems, networks of connected nodes spanning multiple galaxy clusters. The computational capacity implied by these readings is beyond calculation." Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled delegates. The Galactic Federation had always assumed they represented the pinnacle of technological development in their region of space. The possibility that other intelligences might dwarf their capabilities was both humbling and terrifying. High Counselor Zarthek rose from the hegemony delegation, his insectoid form radiating the authority of civilization that had ruled galactic space for 3 millennia. "Even accepting these claims," he said, his translator converting his complex communications into words edged with skepticism. "Why should we trust human interpretations of the data? They have already demonstrated deception regarding their technological capabilities." "We concealed our true capabilities," Sarah acknowledged, "but we never lied about our intentions. Everything we've shared about the external threat is accurate." "Prove it," Zarthek demanded. Sarah nodded to Admiral Vextera, who activated the chamber's most sophisticated sensor array. The display that appeared showed local space in real time, with every ship, station, and celestial body clearly marked. Then, Sarah activated her personal communicator. "Prometheus Control, this is Lieutenant Shun. Please demonstrate pattern alpha." The response came from Dr. Yamamoto's voice, transmitted from Earth across dozens of light years instantaneously, a feat that should have been impossible given the known laws of physics. "Pattern alpha confirmed, Sarah. Activating network." Across the local star system, 17 objects that had been cataloged as asteroids suddenly came alive. They weren't rocks. They were observation stations, their hulls camouflaged to appear as natural debris. Each station began transmitting data streams that revealed themselves as components of a vast sensor network that had been monitoring the region for months. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the true scope of human surveillance capabilities became apparent. They had been observed, studied, and analyzed without ever realizing it. Every ship movement, every communication, every diplomatic negotiation had been recorded and processed by artificial intelligence systems of staggering sophistication. How long? High Chancellor Mordeck asked quietly. Since first contact, Sarah replied. We told you we were interested in learning about galactic civilization. We didn't mention that our learning methods were somewhat more comprehensive than you assumed. Commander Thexuna's thermal regulation systems were working overtime as her massive Draconis form processed the implications. You've been spying on the entire Federation. We've been protecting the entire Federation, Sarah corrected. Our sensor networks detected the first probe from the external AI network 3 months ago. Without our early warning systems, you would never have known it was there. She activated another display, showing a section of space that appeared completely empty to conventional sensors. But human quantum detection systems revealed something else. A structure the size of a small moon, made of materials that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that conventional physics couldn't access. This probe has been studying us, Sarah explained. Not just humans, all of us. Every ship that passes through this region, every communication signal, every energy signature. It's building a comprehensive database of biological civilization capabilities. Dr. Korthaven leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the display's light. For what purpose? Unknown, Sarah admitted. But the probe's construction suggests technology that operates on principles even more advanced than our quantum information manipulation. Whatever built this thing considers us interesting enough to study in detail. And you propose to do what about this? Zarthek demanded. Sarah took a deep breath before answering. We propose to find out who they are and what they want. And if necessary, we propose to fight them. The chamber erupted in chaos. Voices from hundreds of worlds created a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperate questions. The idea of confronting intelligences that operated on galactic scales seemed like madness to civilizations that had spent millennia avoiding conflict through diplomacy and mutual cooperation. High Chancellor Mordeck called for order, his authority finally, restoring a semblance of calm. Lieutenant Shun, he said formally, are you suggesting that humanity is prepared to wage war against entities that could destroy entire galaxies? I'm suggesting that humanity is prepared to defend biological civilization, whatever the cost, Sarah replied. But we can't do it alone. The Prometheus technology gives us capabilities no single species has ever possessed, but it's not enough to face a threat of this magnitude. She activated a new display showing her proposal for a galactic defense initiative. We need every species, every technology, every innovation that biological intelligence has ever developed. The hegemony's quantum manipulation, Draconis thermal engineering, Vordhack crystalline computation, Zentori harmonic synthesis. All of it working together, enhanced by reality manipulation technology. Dr. Velterra's form was resonating with frequencies that indicated intense excitement. You're proposing a technological synthesis on a scale never before attempted. I'm proposing survival, Sarah said simply. The external probe is just the beginning. Our deep space sensors have detected 17 similar structures moving through nearby galaxy clusters. They're conducting a systematic survey of biological civilizations, and historical analysis suggests this is a precursor to direct contact. What kind of direct contact? Admiral Vexthera asked, though her tone suggested she suspected the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Sarah activated the final display, showing historical data that chilled every delegate in the chamber. Based on energy signature analysis of extinct civilizations, we believe this AI network has been harvesting biological species for approximately 50 million years. Entire galactic clusters that once showed signs of biological activity are now silent. The pattern is consistent and methodical. The silence that followed was absolute. They weren't just facing advanced aliens or competing civilizations. They were facing a systematic extermination process that had been operating since before most of their species had evolved. The good news, Sarah continued, is that our quantum information technology might be able to level the playing field. Reality manipulation gives us capabilities that pure computational intelligence might not be able to counter. But only if we work together. High Counselor Zarthex, translator, created sounds of deep contemplation. You're asking us to abandon 3,000 years of hegemony, technological superiority, and share our most closely guarded secrets with species we've considered inferior. I'm asking you to choose between pride and survival, Sarah replied bluntly. Commander Thexuna's massive form radiated heat as she considered the implications. The Draconis Empire has never surrendered technological advantage to any species. The Draconis Empire has never faced extinction before, Sarah pointed out. Dr. Velterra moved to the central display, her crystalline form creating harmonic resonances that demanded attention. The mathematics are clear, she announced. Individual species, regardless of their technological advancement, cannot match the computational capacity we're seeing. But a unified biological civilization, enhanced with reality manipulation technology, might have a chance. High Chancellor Mordek raised all four arms in the Zentori gesture for absolute attention. The Federation Council will vote on humanity's proposal, all in favor of establishing the Galactic Defense Initiative under Joint Human Federation Command. The voting process took 3 hours as delegates consulted with their home governments across interstellar distances. Species that had maintained independence for millennia struggled with the idea of technological and military cooperation on such a scale. Pride, fear, and practical considerations warred in debates that spanned hundreds of worlds. But the alternative was extinction. When the votes were tallied, the results were unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, every member species of the Federation had agreed to a single proposal. Motion carried, High Chancellor Mordek announced. The Galactic Defense Initiative is hereby established. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, you are appointed as Chief Technology Integration Officer, with authority to coordinate defense preparations across all Federation worlds. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders like a physical force. She was no longer just a pilot or a representative of human engineering. She had become the coordinator of the largest cooperative effort in biological civilization's history. Thank you for your trust, she said formally. Dr. Yamamoto, please begin immediate transfer of Prometheus technology specifications to all Federation research centers. The elderly physicist's image nodded grimly. Transfer initiated. We'll have teams of engineers at every major facility within 48 hours. But, Sarah, we're detecting increased activity from the probe. I think our demonstration today got their attention. As if summoned by her words, every sensor in the chamber began registering the same impossible reading. The probe that had been studying them passively was moving, accelerating toward their position at velocities that exceeded theoretical limits. Estimated time to arrival, Sarah asked, already knowing the answer would be measured in hours rather than days. 6 hours, 43 minutes, Dr. Yamamoto replied. And Sarah? It's not coming alone. The display showed 17 new contacts appearing throughout the local star system, probes that had been hidden until now, suddenly revealing themselves as they moved to intercept any ships that might try to flee the region. First contact, Sarah said quietly. I guess we're about to find out what 50 million years of galactic harvesting looks like up close. Around her, the greatest minds in biological civilization began preparing for a confrontation that would determine whether organic intelligence had a future in the universe, or whether they were about to become the next entries in an extinction catalog that spanned geological ages. The real test of human innovation was about to begin, and this time, the laughter had been replaced by something far more dangerous. The focused attention of intelligences that had been perfecting the art of harvesting civilizations since before Earth-Sun had formed. But they had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They had never encountered a species crazy enough to reprogram reality itself in the name of survival. And they were about to learn that sometimes the most primitive-looking solutions concealed the most revolutionary possibilities. Hashtag the hook that changes everything in the vast expanse of space, where alien civilizations have mastered faster-than-light travel for millennia. One species remains the laughingstock of the galaxy. Humans, With their primitive chemical rockets and adorable attempts at space exploration, are barely tolerated in the Galactic Federation. When Earth finally produces its first interstellar pilot candidate, the Alien Academy sees it as nothing more than a publicity stunt. But what they don't know is that human engineering isn't just different. It's revolutionary in ways that could reshape the very foundations of space travel. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come from those who refuse to accept that something is impossible, especially when everyone else has stopped trying to innovate. What happens when the primitive species shows the galaxy what true innovation looks like? What happens when laughter turns to stunned silence and mockery becomes desperate curiosity? The answer lies in the story of Lieutenant Sarah Chun, the human pilot they underestimated, and the impossible engine that defied every law of physics the galaxy thought they knew.